The first thing that struck Kira about the neutral ground wasn't the mixed-species clientele or the chaotic decor. It was the sound. Where coalition establishments maintained careful acoustic controls to prevent species overlap, this place was alive with noise. Conversations in a dozen languages layered over each other, punctuated by the hiss of steam, the clink of cups, and periodic bursts of that physical human laughter. She stood just inside the doorway, letting her eyes adjust to the warm lighting. Her chromatophores flickered uncertainly, trying to find an appropriate pattern for this unprecedented situation. A few patrons glanced up at her entrance. A Rigelian merchant nursing something purple, two Vorthan engineers arguing over a holographic schematic, a human female reading an actual paper book in the corner. Their interest was casual, fleeting. No one scanned her for compatibility markers or checked her bonding status. She was just another customer. First time, the voice came from her left. A human female with silver hair and kind eyes was wiping down a table. She wore the same style apron as the male behind the counter, decorated with phrases in various languages. Yes, Kira managed, her translator working to modulate her voice into human audible ranges. How did you know? The woman smiled, an expression that involved her entire face in a way that was foreign but somehow warming. You've got that look, like you're not sure if you're in the right place. She straightened, tossing the cloth over her shoulder with practiced ease. I'm Sada. I own this chaos. And you're definitely in the right place. I'm Kira. The name felt strange without her full designation, without the family connections and genetic markers that usually followed. Just Kira. Well, Kira, welcome to the neutral ground. Rules are simple. No fighting, no preaching, and no scanning people without consent. Everything else, we figure out as we go. You looking for coffee, food, or just a place to exist for a while? I'm looking for Kira Post. How did you tell a stranger you were looking for someone to save you from social death? I heard humans come here. Sarah's smile widened. That we do. Can't seem to get rid of them. Especially that one. She nodded toward the bar where the dark-haired male was constructing something elaborate involving multiple liquids and what appeared to be controlled flame. Marcus makes the best coffee this side of the jump gate, but I wouldn't recommend asking him about it unless you've got an hour to spare. Man has opinions about bean roasting that border on religious. Marcus, Kira repeated, testing the name. Human names were so brief, lacking the generational echoes and harmonic overtones of Zalani designations. Just singular sounds that somehow contained entire identities. Go on, grab a seat anywhere you like. He'll be with you once he's done showing off for the Etherians. Kira looked where Sarah indicated and saw two of the gaseous beings floating near the bar, their forms shimmering with appreciation as Marcus produced a beverage that somehow steamed in 3 different colors. Of course, humans would figure out how to make coffee for beings who didn't technically have mouths. She chose a small table near the window, where she could observe the room while maintaining some distance. The furniture was clearly salvaged from different sources. Her chair looked Terran in origin, while the table showed Altarian craftsmanship. Nothing matched, yet somehow it all belonged together. The menu materialized on the table's surface when she sat, offering options in 17 languages. The coffee section alone went on for 3 pages, with variations she couldn't begin to understand. What was the difference between a cappuccino and a cordido? Why did some drinks have milk from earth animals while others used synthetic alternatives? What exactly was a shot? And why would you want to pull long? First time with human coffee. She looked up to find Marcus standing beside her table. Up close, he was both more and less than the image had suggested. His features were undeniably plain by galactic standards. No natural markings, no adaptive coloration, just skin that showed where from expression and time. But his eyes, humans had a saying about eyes being windows to souls, which she'd assumed was poetic metaphor. Now she understood it was simply accurate. There was a depth there, a complexity of emotion, and thought that no genetic scan could quantify. First time with humans at all, she admitted, surprised by her own honesty. His eyebrows, another fascinating human feature, mobile hair used for expression, rose slightly. And you came to a coffee shop? That's either very brave or very desperate. Can it be both? He laughed, that full-body expression of mirth she'd seen in the image. Speaking as a human, it usually is. Mind if I sit? The Ethereans will take about 10 minutes to figure out how to drink what I just made them, and I could use a break. She gestured to the empty chair, her chromatophores shifting to what she hoped was an inviting pattern. He sat with the casual grace of someone comfortable in his own skin, a concept that felt foreign after years of constantly adjusting herself to meet other species standards. "I'm Marcus," he said, extending his hand across the table. She stared at the appendage. "I'm not sure what you want me to do with that." Another laugh. "Right, sorry. Handshake. Human greeting ritual. We grasp hands briefly as a sign of peaceful intent. Dates back to when we needed to prove we weren't holding weapons, which probably tells you everything you need to know about human history. You greet each other by proving you're not immediately dangerous? When you put it like that, it sounds pretty paranoid." He withdrew his hand, but seemed unbothered by the failed gesture. Though, given human history, probably justified. We're kind of a mess as a species. "The Coalition classifies you as a chaos species," Kira offered, then immediately regretted it. But Marcus just grinned wider. "Only because they're being polite. We prefer creatively inconsistent. So, what brings a Zelani to our little corner of controlled chaos?" She tensed. "How did you know I was Zelani? The bioluminescence is pretty distinctive. Plus, you've got that harmonic undertone to your voice. Had a Zelani linguist in here last month trying to teach me your trade language. I butchered it completely, but she said my attempts were charmingly awful, which I took as a win." He knew her species, but hadn't immediately asked about her bonding status. Hadn't calculated their genetic compatibility or scanned for pheromone matches. Was simply talking to her. "I'm looking for something different," she said carefully. "The Coalition matching system hasn't been successful for me." "Ah." His expression shifted, becoming something softer, but no less genuine. "Let me guess. They ran you through their algorithms, genetic screens, and compatibility matrices, and the computer said no?" 43 times. He whistled, another uniquely human sound. "That's rough. I'm sorry." The simple sympathy, offered without judgment or probing for details, threatened to undo her composure entirely. When was the last time someone had just acknowledged her pain without trying to fix it or explain it away? "Though," he continued, leaning back in his chair, "speaking as someone who's been rejected by exactly 100% of the dating apps on Earth, I can say their loss." "You've been rejected too?" "Oh, constantly. Apparently, I'm too intense about coffee, spend too much time at work, and have an unhealthy relationship with my espresso machine." "That last one might be fair. Actually, I did name her Valentina. You named your coffee-making equipment. She's not equipment. She's a precision instrument deserving of respect and affection." He paused, then added with self-aware humor, "And that right there is probably why I'm single." Despite everything, Kira felt her chromatophores shift toward amusement. The Coalition would find emotional attachment to inanimate objects highly illogical. Yeah, well, the Coalition also thinks love can be reduced to chemical equations and genetic compatibility matrices. How's that working out for them? It was such a fundamentally human response, dismissing the entire foundation of galactic civilization with casual irreverence. No Zelani would dare question the Coalition's methods so brazenly. But then, humans hadn't built their relationships on Coalition methods. "Can I ask you something?" she said, surprising herself again. "How do humans decide who to bond with? Without genetic screening or compatibility algorithms?" Marcus considered this, absently turning his coffee cup in slow circles. "Honestly, we make it up as we go. Sometimes it's physical attraction. Sometimes it's shared interests. Sometimes you meet someone and just know. And sometimes you're completely wrong and it ends in disaster. But sometimes you're right and it's worth all the disasters that came before." That seems terrifyingly random. It absolutely is. But here's the thing. Humans have been trying to logic our way out of loneliness for thousands of years. We've tried arranged marriages, computer dating, apps that match you based on everything from astrological signs to DNA markers. And you know what we learned? Love isn't logical. It's not supposed to be. It's messy and complicated, and sometimes it happens between people who make no sense on paper, but somehow work in reality. A group of Altarians entered the shop, their crystalline forms chiming with excitement. Marcus glanced over, then back to Kira. I should probably take their order before they start harmonizing. That tends to shatter the glassware. But he hesitated, then seemed to make a decision. Look, I don't know what you're looking for, and I'm not going to pretend that humans have romance figured out any better than anyone else. But if you want to stick around, I make excellent coffee and terrible jokes. The conversation's free with purchase. He stood to go, then paused. What kind of coffee do you like? I've never had coffee. His expression was like she'd admitted to never seeing stars. Okay, now that's a tragedy we need to fix. Tell you what, I'll make you something simple to start. On the house, because nobody should have to pay for their first coffee. Especially not after 43 rejections. He moved toward the bar with purpose, leaving Kira alone with her thoughts. The casual kindness, the easy acceptance, the complete lack of judgment. It was everything the coalition system wasn't. No wonder humans were classified as chaotic. They broke all the rules. Through the window, she watched the traffic of Harmony Station. Beings of all species move past, each locked in their own purposes and patterns. How many of them were like her, she wondered. How many had been told they didn't fit, didn't match, didn't belong? And how many had never thought to step outside the system that rejected them? One human disaster, as promised. Marcus had returned, setting a cup before her that steamed with promise. The liquid was dark brown, topped with a pattern of white foam that had somehow been shaped into a spiral galaxy. You made art of my beverage. Latte art. Completely unnecessary, mildly pretentious, but it makes me happy. Kind of like humans in general. He brought his own cup and reclaimed his seat. Try it. If you hate it, I'll make you something else. We've got teas that don't actively assault your taste buds. Kira lifted the cup carefully, inhaling the complex aroma. It was unlike anything in Zilani cuisine, bitter and sweet, harsh and smooth, simple and infinitely complex. Like humans themselves, she supposed. The first sip was a revelation. The heat, the texture, the way it seemed to wake up parts of her mind she didn't know were sleeping. Your bioluminescence is doing something interesting, Marcus observed. Good interesting or bad interesting? She looked down at her arms, seeing the rapid, swirling patterns her chromatophores were creating. I don't know. This is new. New can be good. Or terrible. But at least it's not boring. He took a sip of his own coffee, watching her over the rim. So, Kira, who's never had coffee and has been rejected by 43 species. What's your story? Besides the rejection part, what do you do when you're not being disappointed by algorithmic matchmaking? It was such a human question. The coalition would want to know her genetic markers, her fertility windows, her psychological profile. Marcus wanted to know what she did, who she was beyond the data. I'm a xenoharmonicist, she said, then clarified at his blank look. I study the mathematical relationships between different species' communication methods. How sound becomes meaning across biological boundaries. His eyes lit up with genuine interest. That's fascinating. So you can translate between species that shouldn't be able to communicate. In theory. In practice, it's mostly filing reports about why the Vorthan ambassador's speech patterns keep making the Rigelian delegation physically ill. Sounds like my job. In theory, I make coffee. In practice, I'm mostly preventing interspecies incidents over caffeine rights. He leaned forward, and she caught a scent that was uniquely human, not unpleasant, just different from anything she'd encountered. Last week, I had to mediate a near war between two Thorian hive clusters over who ordered the last piece of Earth cheesecake. How do you mediate a near war over dessert? I made 2 cheesecakes. Sometimes the simplest solutions are the best ones. He paused, studying her with those expressive eyes. Can I ask you something that might be too personal? She nodded, bracing for questions about her rejections, her genetic flaws, her failure to bond. What made you decide to try humans? After all those rejections, what made you think we'd be different? It wasn't the question she'd expected. She turned the coffee cup in her hands, mirroring his earlier gesture, feeling the warmth against her palms. A human philosopher once wrote that the definition of insanity is doing the same thing repeatedly while expecting different results, she said. I've been saying for 43 rejections. I thought it might be time to try insanity. Marcus laughed again, that bright, physical sound. Einstein, though he probably wasn't talking about interspecies dating. Then, again, knowing humans he might have been, he raised his cup in what her cultural database suggested was a toast. To insanity, then, and to coffee that doesn't follow regulations. She touched her cup to his, the small clink resonating through the busy shop. Around them, the chaos of a neutral ground continued. Conversations in multiple languages, the hiss of steam, the quiet contentment of beings just existing in shared space. No algorithms, no compatibility scores, no predetermined outcomes. Just possibility. I should warn you, Marcus said after they'd both taken another sip. Humans are terrible at courtship. We say the wrong things, miss obvious signals, and occasionally do things like serenade people under windows, which most species find either charming or restraining order worthy. Serenade? Singing. Badly, usually, at night, to demonstrate affection. We're not a subtle species. The Zilani court, through carefully orchestrated light, shows that can take months to perfect, Kira offered. Each pattern has 17 possible meanings, depending on context and lunar positioning. See, that's beautiful and poetic. Humans just show up at your door with flowers we've killed and ask if you want to get food together. Why killed flowers? Because live ones are harder to wrap? He shrugged. Nobody really knows. It's one of those things we do because we've always done it, like shaking hands or putting candles on cakes we set on fire. You set your food on fire? Only ceremonially. And only the dessert. Look, I told you we don't make sense. The Altarians had started their order, their crystalline harmonics filling the shop with something between music and mathematics. Marcus glanced over, but didn't move to interrupt. Sarah's got them. She speaks fluent Altarian. Well, she hums fluent Altarian. Same thing, really. How does a human learn to communicate through crystalline resonance? She fell in love with an Altarian poet. Spent 3 years learning to sing silicon. They're not together anymore, but she kept the language. Said it was too beautiful to forget. That's Kira's search for words. Incredibly romantic and terribly sad. Most human stories are. We're kind of addicted to bittersweet endings. Happy ones too, but we remember the ones that hurt. He met her eyes directly. Is that what you're afraid of? That trying something different will just be another hurt to remember? The question cut through her defenses with surgical precision. Yes. Fair. More than fair, actually. You've been hurt 43 times by a system that promised you scientific certainty. Why risk being hurt by one that promises you nothing? He leaned back, but his gaze stayed steady. I could give you the human optimism speech about how it's better to have loved and lost, but honestly, sometimes it's not. Sometimes it just hurts. But, she prompted when he paused. But sometimes you meet someone in a coffee shop who's never had coffee before, and you spend an hour talking, and it's the best hour you've had in months. And maybe that's enough. Maybe it doesn't have to be about forever, or genetic compatibility, or cosmic destiny. Maybe it can just be about right now. Kira felt her patterns shifting again, cycling through emotions she didn't have names for. The coalition had taught her to think in terms of permanence, of bonds that were meant to last lifetimes. The human was offering something else entirely. Connection without guarantee, presence without promise. I don't know how to do that, she admitted. To just exist in a moment without calculating its future impact. Lucky for you, humans specialize in living badly in the moment. We could teach seminars on short-term thinking. His smile softened. Look, I'm not saying humans have it figured out. We're just as lonely and confused as everyone else. But we got really good at being lonely and confused together. That's something, right? Sarah appeared at their table, refilling Marcus's cup without being asked. The Ethereans figured out the triple steam, she reported. They're now debating whether you're a genius or a madman. Why not both? Marcus replied. It's the human way. Sarah glanced between them, and Kira caught what might have been approval in her expression. I'm closing early tonight. Big shipment coming in from Earth, assuming the customs officials don't confiscate our coffee again. They're still mad about the espresso incident. Marcus explained to Kira. Turns out concentrated caffeine registers as a controlled substance on some scanners. You're importing controlled substances? Only by accident. And only if you're a species that gets high on methylxanthines. He paused, which, thinking about it, is like a third of the coalition. Okay, we might be importing controlled substances. Sarah shook her head, amused. Just try not to start any wars while I'm gone. The insurance doesn't cover acts of beverage-related aggression. She moved away, leaving them alone again. Should I be concerned about the coffee I'm drinking? Kira asked. Nah, Zilani processed caffeine fine. I looked it up before I made your latte. At her surprise, he added, "What? I'm not going to poison someone on their first coffee experience. I have standards. Low ones, but still standards." The shop was beginning to empty as the station's artificial evening approached. Soon, Kira would need to decide where to go, what to do next. She'd come here with vague hopes and desperate dreams, found a human who made art and beverages, and spoke about love like it was a choice rather than a calculation. Was that enough to build on? Was anything? "I have a confession," Marcus said suddenly. "I saw you looking at the shop earlier. Through the security feeds. You stood outside for almost 5 minutes before coming in." She felt exposed, her patterns shifting to defensive configurations. "You were watching me?" "Not intentionally. The feeds auto-flag when someone lingers that long. Usually means they're casing the place or having an existential crisis. I'm guessing you were door number 2. What gave it away? The way you were holding yourself. Like the door was both the best and worst thing you could walk through. I've seen that look before. Usually on humans, but apparently existential dread is universal. What made you think I'd actually come in? You consider this. Honestly, the way your colors shifted right before you pushed the door. From nervous to determined in about 2 seconds. That takes courage. Plus, anyone who stands outside a coffee shop for 5 minutes clearly needs caffeine. It was basically a humanitarian intervention. So, this was charity? She tried to keep the hurt from her voice, but human faces were expressive things. He caught it immediately. "No, this was curiosity. You're the first Solani to come in here alone. Did you know that? Your species usually travels in harmonic groups. Minimum of 3 for social comfort. But here you are, solo, ordering coffee from chaos species. That's interesting. I like interesting. Interesting enough to overlook 43 rejections? You keep saying that like it's supposed to scare me off. Like I'm going to suddenly remember I have standards and flee." He leaned forward again. "Kira, I work in a coffee shop on a border station. My dating pool consists of smugglers, refugees, and the occasional diplomat who's lost enough to end up here. I'm not exactly fighting off marriage proposals. But you could return to Earth. Find a human partner." "Could I?" He laughed, but this time it had an edge. "I left Earth because I didn't fit there either. Too restless for the colonies, too domesticated for the frontier. I make coffee for aliens because it's the only thing that makes sense to me. You think you're the only one who doesn't match their species' algorithms." The confession hung between them, creating a different kind of connection. Not attraction, not yet, but recognition. Two people who didn't fit the patterns their worlds had drawn for them. "So what do we do?" Kira asked. "Two misfits in a coffee shop. We finish our coffee. We talk until the station lights dim. Maybe we make plans to talk again tomorrow. Or maybe we don't. Maybe this is just one good conversation that doesn't lead anywhere." He smiled, and she was beginning to understand the nuances in human expressions. This one was hopeful, but cautious. But if humans are good at anything, it's making something out of nothing. And right now, this doesn't feel like nothing. She looked at him, really looked. Not through the lens of genetic compatibility or social acceptability, but as one sentient being to another. He was right. It didn't feel like nothing. "Tell me about Earth coffee," she said, making her choice. "Why did your people decide to export a bitter stimulant across the galaxy?" His face lit up with the enthusiasm of someone given permission to discuss their passion. "Oh, that's actually a great story. So it started with this human trader who thought alien species might appreciate legal drugs. As Marcus launched into what was clearly a well-rehearsed narrative involving smugglers, taste-testing disasters, and at least one diplomatic incident, Kira felt something she hadn't experienced in years. Not hope exactly. She had hope before each of her 43 rejections. This was different. This was possibility without expectation, connection without calculation. The Zilani had words for 47 different types of love, each categorized by intensity, duration, and biological compatibility. But sitting in a human coffee shop, listening to a barista explain why his species had decided that bitter bean water was worth sharing with the universe, Kira thought maybe her people had missed something. Maybe there were types of connection that couldn't be categorized or predicted. Maybe the humans were onto something with their chaos. And that's why we're technically banned from serving espresso to the morphs, Marcus concluded. Though they keep asking, so I think they actually like the hallucinations. Your species exported a beverage that causes other species to hallucinate? In our defense, we didn't know that would happen. Human physiology is weird, but apparently everyone else's is weirder. He glanced at the chronometer on the wall. Station's about to hit night cycle. Do you have somewhere to stay? The question brought reality crashing back. She'd been so focused on getting here, on taking this insane chance, that she hadn't thought about practicalities. Not yet. I suppose I should find lodgings. The way station's decent. Clean, allows all species, and the owner owes me a favor. I accidentally made his Quelari mate the perfect tea, and now she won't stay anywhere else when she's in system. He pulled out a communication device, typing quickly. I'll let him know you're coming. Tell him you're a friend of the shop. Is that what I am? A friend of the shop? He looked up from his device, meeting her eyes. For now. Unless you prefer customer who had their first coffee and didn't immediately flee. It's less catchy, but more accurate. I think I prefer friend. Friend it is. He stood, and she realized their conversation was ending. The realization brought a flutter of panic. What if this was it? What if she'd misread human signals? What if? Same time tomorrow, he asked, cutting through her spiral. I'll be here from dawn cycle on. We could try you on different roasts, see what you like. Fair warning, I take coffee education very seriously. There may be charts. You want to see me tomorrow? Unless you have 44 other species to be rejected by. He winced. Sorry, that came out wrong. What I meant was, yes, I'd like to continue our conversation. If you would. I would, she said, standing as well. Her legs felt unsteady, though whether from the caffeine or the emotional whiplash, she couldn't say. Good. Great. I mean casual great, not life-changing great. Though who knows? He was babbling now, a very human trait she found oddly endearing. Bring your translation of that Vorthen-Rigelian conflict. I want to hear how sound can literally make people sick. Seems useful for dealing with difficult customers. They walked to the door together, the shop now empty except for Sarah counting the day's receipts. Outside, Harmony Station had shifted to its night lighting, softer and bluer to accommodate the majority of species' circadian rhythms. Thank you, Kira said, not sure what exactly she was thanking him for. The coffee? The conversation? The lack of judgment? Thank you, he replied, for taking a chance on chaos. For walking through that door, even though you were terrified. For not running when I started talking about coffee like it was a religion. Is it a religion for you? Nah, religions promise answers. Coffee just helps you ask better questions. He smiled one more time. See you tomorrow, Kira, who took a chance. See you tomorrow, Marcus, who makes art and beverages. She walked away before she could say something to ruin it, following his directions to the way station. Behind her, she heard him cleaning up, humming something that might have been music or might have just been human contentment. Her chromatophores had settled into a pattern she didn't recognize, something between hope and fear and anticipation. 43 species had rejected her based on careful analysis and scientific certainty. One human had invited her back based on nothing more than a conversation and shared caffeine. The coalition would call it madness. Maybe it was. The way station's proprietor, a Benzari whose scales shifted from purple to green when Kira mentioned Marcus's name, gave her what he called the friend rate and a room with a viewport facing the nebula. She'd spent half the night watching cosmic gases swirl while her mind replayed every moment of the coffee shop encounter, analyzing it with the thoroughness her species applied to everything. But human interactions, she was learning, didn't respond well to analysis. Now, standing outside the neutral ground at what the station called dawn, she felt the same nervous energy that had plagued her the day before. What if Marcus had reconsidered? What if his invitation had been mere politeness? What if? The door opened before she could spiral further. Sarah stood there, that knowing smile already in place. He's been here since 0400, experimenting with new blends, she said by way of greeting. Fair warning, he might be slightly overcaffeinated. I caught him explaining quantum foam theory to the espresso machine. Is that normal? For Marcus? Absolutely. Come on, before he achieves consciousness singularity through coffee overdose. The shop was empty except for Marcus, who was indeed engaged in animated conversation with a complicated-looking machine. He had a tablet in one hand, gesturing with the other at what appeared to be temperature readings. And that's why 17 seconds is optimal for the first extraction, but you keep pushing to 19, which throws off the entire. He noticed a presence and spun around, nearly dropping the tablet. Kia, you came back. You invited me. she said, confused by his surprise. Yeah, but people say things. Doesn't mean they follow through, especially after sleeping on it, and remembering they have better options in coffee with the border station weirdo. He set the tablet down, running a hand through his hair in what she was beginning to recognize as a nervous gesture. I may have had too much of my own product this morning. How much is too much? Let's just say if I vibrate out of phase with local space-time, avenge me. He paused. That was a joke. Probably. Human humor doesn't translate well, does it? I'm learning to appreciate it, Kira said, surprised to find it was true. Sarah shook her head. I'm leaving before you two make this any more awkward. Try not to transcend any dimensional boundaries before the lunch rush. She headed for the back office, muttering something about disaster children that the translator couldn't quite parse. So, Marcus said once they were alone, ready for coffee education? I promised to keep the quantum physics to a minimum. You were explaining quantum foam to your equipment. She started it. Valentina's been temperamental all morning. He patted the machine affectionately. But she's willing to behave for educational purposes. I think she likes you. Your coffee machine has preferences about customers? Doesn't everything? He started pulling out various containers, each labeled in multiple languages. Today we're going to find out what kind of coffee drinker you are. It's like a personality test, but with more caffeine and less existential dread. She settled onto a stool at the bar, watching him work. His movements were precise despite his claimed over-caffeination, each gesture purposeful. It was like watching a dance, she realized. Humans turned everything into art, even beverage preparation. Question, she said as he arranged small cups in front of her. Yesterday you said you looked up whether Zelani could process caffeine. What did you do that? His hands paused for just a moment. When I saw you standing outside. Figured if you came in, I should be prepared. You researched my species biochemistry on the chance I might order coffee. I research everyone's biochemistry. Can't be too careful when you're dealing with xenochemistry. Last thing I need is to accidentally poison a diplomat. He started grinding beans, the rich aroma filling the space between them. Plus, you look like you needed coffee. It's a barista instinct. Barista? Human word for someone who makes coffee professionally. Comes from an Earth language where it means bartender, which tells you everything about how seriously humans take their stimulants. He began preparing the first sample. We're going to start with light roasts and work our way to dark. Tell me what you taste. The next hour became a journey through human coffee culture. Each sample came with a story. This one from mountains where humans first discovered coffee. That one from a colony where they'd adapted earth plants to alien soil. Marcus's passion was infectious, his excitement growing with each observation she made about flavor profiles and aromatic compounds. You have a better palate than most humans, he said after she'd correctly identified notes of what he called chocolate in a medium roast. Must be those Zelani harmonics. You're basically tasting in colors. Is that good? It's fantastic. Do you know how hard it is to explain coffee complexity to species that only taste in binary? The Vex appreciate coffee purely as a chemical compound. Efficient, but they miss all the poetry. There's poetry in coffee. There's poetry in everything if you look hard enough. You prepare another sample. This one darker, more complex. Humans find meaning in the weirdest places. Coffee, sunsets, the way light hits broken glass. It's probably a survival mechanism. If you can find beauty in small things, the big disasters don't crush you quite as much. She sipped the new sample, letting the flavors develop. This one tastes like burned wood, but pleasant burned wood. Charcoal notes. You're a natural. He leaned against the counter, watching her with an intensity that made her chromatophores flicker. Can I ask you something that might be intrusive? After yesterday's conversation, I'm not sure anything qualifies as too intrusive. Fair point. He fidgeted with a cleaning cloth, another nervous gesture. What made you choose humans specifically? Out of all the non-coalition species, why us? It was the same question he'd asked yesterday, but deeper now. Yesterday had been about desperation. This was about something else. You help, she said simply. When Amorphs were quarantined, humans brought supplies. When the Etherians needed new containment suits, humans designed them. When everyone else follows protocols, humans break them to help people. We're also the species that nearly destroyed our own planet 3 times and invented weapons that could crack moons, he pointed out. Yes, she agreed. But then you decided not to use them. The coalition views that as chaos. I think it might be choice. He was quiet for a moment, processing this. So you came looking for people who choose? I came looking for people who might choose me. The words hung between them, more honest than she'd intended. Marcus set down the cloth, his expression shifting to something she couldn't quite read. Kira, he said carefully, I need you to understand something about humans. We don't do things halfway. When we choose someone, friend, partner, whatever, we're all in. It's messy and complicated, and we absolutely will screw up sometimes. But we don't give up easily. If you're looking for casual acceptance, humans might not be your best bet. The coalition offered me casual acceptance 43 times, as long as I met their criteria, she replied. I'm not looking for casual anything anymore. A customer entered, a Rigelian who ordered something complicated involving 3 sugars and no actual coffee. Marcus handled it with professional efficiency, but Kira noticed how quickly he returned to their conversation. Tell me about the Vorthan Rigelian translation issue, he said, picking up where they'd left off as if the interruption hadn't happened. How does sound make people physically ill? Grateful for the shift to safer ground, Kira launched into an explanation of competitive resonance frequencies and biological incompatibility. Marcus listened with genuine interest, asking questions that showed he understood more than she'd expected. So basically, the Vorthan language vibrates at a frequency that disrupts Rigelian inner ear fluid. Essentially, the Vorthans can't help it. It's how their vocal cords evolved. But to Rigelians, it's like being on a boat in a storm every time they speak. Have you tried modulation filters? Dozens of variations. The problem is that filtering out the problematic frequencies also removes meaning. Vorthan relies heavily on microtonal variations. Remove those, and hello becomes indistinguishable from your ancestors or waste processors. Marcus laughed so hard he nearly dropped the cup he was cleaning. That's amazing. Galactic peace derailed by accidental insults. It's less amusing when you're trying to prevent trade wars. You bet. Though humans would probably find a way to monetize it. Learn to insult your enemies in frequencies they can't hear. We're terrible like that. He prepared another coffee sample. Try this one. It's my personal favorite. She sipped, and her chromatophores immediately shifted to warm gold. How is this the same beverage as the others? Different origin, different processing, different roast. Same basic bean, infinite variations. Kind of like people when you think about it. He poured himself a cup from the same batch. No two humans like their coffee exactly the same way. We've got millions of people drinking the same thing, all convinced their way is the only correct way. That sounds exhausting. It really is. But it's also kind of beautiful. All that individuality, all that insistence on personal preference. He met her eyes over his cup. Zalani culture values harmony, right? Everyone finding their perfect match, their ordained place. That's the theory. Must be hard, being the one who doesn't harmonize correctly. She looked down at her coffee, watching the steam rise in delicate spirals. My mother says I was born with discordant frequencies. That some souls are just made wrong. Your mother sounds like she needs better coffee and worse opinions. The blunt human response startled a laugh out of her. You can't just dismiss millennia of Zalani philosophy like that. Watch me. He leaned forward, his expression serious now. I don't know much about Zalani culture, but I know about being the weird one. The one who doesn't fit the pattern. And I know that made wrong is garbage thinking. Different isn't wrong. It's just different. Easy for you to say. Humans celebrate difference. Do we? He gestured around the empty shop. I'm working on a border station because Earth didn't know what to do with me either. Too obsessed with coffee to be normal, not obsessed enough to be a proper artist. I speak 6 languages, but can't small talk in any of them. I memorize the biochemistry of every species I meet, but forget human birthdays. You think that made me popular back home? But you found a place here. I made a place. Big difference. Sarah took a chance on a weird human who wanted to make coffee for aliens. I took a chance that maybe aliens would want coffee from a weird human. We built something that shouldn't work, but does. He paused, seeming to weigh his next words. Kind of what I'm hoping we're doing here. We're building something, aren't we? You came back. I'm showing you my coffee collection like it's precious jewels. We're talking about universal translation and cultural incompatibility over stimulants. That's something, right? More customers arrived. A group of Thorian workers starting their shift. Marcus handled their orders with easy familiarity, knowing preferences without asking. But Kira noticed how his attention kept drifting back to her, how he smiled when he caught her watching him work. "You're good at this," she observed when the rush passed. "Making everyone feel welcome. Coffee shop's secret. Everyone's equal when they need caffeine. Doesn't matter if you're a diplomat or a dock worker, carbon-based or silicon. The need for chemical stimulation is apparently universal." The Coalition would find that reductionist. The Coalition finds everything about humans reductionist. We're simple creatures with complicated feelings. They prefer it the other way around. He started cleaning equipment, movements automatic from repetition. "Speaking of which, have they contacted you? About your situation?" 17 messages, she admitted. "I haven't read them." "Why not?" "Because I know what they'll say. That I'm being illogical. That I'm wasting valuable time. That I should accept the monastery placement and stop embarrassing my genetic line." She felt her patterns shift to defensive configurations. "That seeking connection with the chaos species is the final proof of my unfitness." Harsh, accurate by their standards. Their standards suck. Again, the simple human dismissal of everything she'd been taught. It should have been offensive. Instead, it was liberating. "Can I tell you something weird?" Marcus said, then continued without waiting for permission. "I like that you've been rejected 43 times. Her patterns flashed hurt before she could control them. "No, wait, that came out wrong." He set down his cleaning supplies, giving her his full attention. "I mean, you survived 43 rejections, and you're still trying. Do you know how much strength that takes? Most humans give up after 2 or 3. You got knocked down 43 times and got back up 44. That's not broken. That's unbreakable. I don't feel unbreakable. Nobody does. That's the secret. Everyone's walking around feeling like they're one bad day from shattering. The difference is whether you let it stop you." He poured her another cup, this one from a thermal container marked with symbols she couldn't read. "Here, this one's special." She sipped, and her entire sensory system lit up. It was coffee, but also something more, spices she couldn't identify, a warmth that spread beyond the physical. "What is this?" "Human holiday blend. My grandmother's recipe. She used to make it when everything felt impossible. Said if the world was ending, might as well have good coffee while it burned." He smiled at the memory. "Very human philosophy. It tastes like hope. Now you're thinking like a barista. Find the feeling in the flavor." He prepared a cup for himself, inhaling deeply before drinking. Humans have this saying, "It's always darkest before the dawn." Took me years to realize it's not about waiting for light. It's about choosing to make coffee in the dark. A comfortable silence settled between them. Outside, Harmony Station was fully awake now, the corridor beyond the shop flowing with morning traffic. But inside their bubble of warm lights and coffee aroma, time felt negotiable. "I should tell you something," Kira said eventually, "about Zelani bonding, so you understand what this is, or could be." "Okay." He settled against the counter, giving her space but maintaining attention. "We don't date, as humans understand it. When a Zelani decides someone is compatible, we begin a process called resonance building. Small contacts, shared experiences, gradual synchronization of biological rhythms." She paused, trying to translate concepts that didn't have human equivalents. "It's supposed to take 30 to 40 cycles. By the end, both parties either achieve harmonic convergence or recognize incompatibility." Sounds very organized. It's meant to be, except I've never made it past the 3rd meeting. My frequencies apparently destabilize over time. The more someone knows me, the less compatible we become. She couldn't keep the bitterness from her voice. The translation specialist who rejected me said I was like a song that starts beautiful, but develops discordance the longer you listen. He sounds like an ass. And she was being kind by Zelani standards. At least she tried 3 meetings. Most reject me on first scan. Marcus was quiet for a moment, then said, "You know what I love about human music? The dissonance. The notes that don't quite match. The rhythms that fight each other before resolving. Perfect harmony is boring. It's the imperfections that make it interesting." That's a very human perspective. Guilty as charged. But think about it. You study xenoharmonics. You literally specialize in finding communication between incompatible systems. Maybe you're not broken. Maybe you're evolved for something different. Evolved for loneliness. Evolved for bridge building. For connecting things that shouldn't connect. He gestured between them. like a Zilani who glows and a human who makes bitter plant water for a living. Sarah emerged from the back office, took one look at them, and immediately turned around. Nope, too much emotional processing before noon. I'll be doing inventory if anyone needs me. She paused at the door. Marcus, remember you have actual other customers. I'm multitask, he called after her, then turned back to Kira. She's right, though. The lunch rush starts soon. But he hesitated, then pushed forward. Would you like to help? I could use an extra pair of hands, and you could see how humans function in groups. Purely anthropological interest, of course. I don't know how to make coffee. I'll teach you. Fair warning. I'm a perfectionist about pour-over technique. There may be lectures. You want me to work with you? I want to spend time with you, he corrected. Work is just the excuse. Plus, you speak 17 languages, and I constantly have translation issues. It's practical. I speak 12 languages. See? Already correcting my mistakes. You're perfect for the job. She considered this. In Zilani culture, working together was the fourth stage of bonding after genetic compatibility was confirmed. But humans did everything backward anyway. I'll probably spill things. Baptism by coffee. Very human tradition. He grinned at her expression. That was another joke. Mostly. So what do you say? Want to learn the ancient human art of serving socially acceptable drugs to cranky aliens? When you put it like that, how can I refuse? You can't. It's my charm. I'm told it's unbearable. He tossed her an apron. Welcome to the neutral ground. First rule, the customer is always wrong, but we pretend otherwise. Second rule, never admit the coffee is addictive. Third rule, if someone orders decaf, we judge them silently but thoroughly. These seem like terrible business practices, and yet here we are, thriving through pure spite and caffeine. He showed her the basic equipment, hands guiding hers through the movements. The key is confidence. Act like you know what you're doing, and usually things work out. Is that how humans approach everything? Pretty much. Fake it till you make it. Shoot for the moon. Leap before you look. We have a lot of sayings that basically mean try things and see what happens. The lunch rush arrived before she could respond. Suddenly, the shop was full of beings of every description, all wanting their specific drinks with specific modifications. Marcus moved like a dancer, filling orders while keeping up a steady stream of chatter. He guided Kira through simple tasks, operating the register, preparing basic teas, translating for a Quellari whose universal translator had malfunctioned. It was chaos. It was exhausting. It was the most alive she'd felt in years. You're glowing, Marcus said during a brief lull, nodding at her arms. She looked down to see her chromatophores cycling through rapid, bright patterns. Excitement, nervousness, joy, all mixing together. I can't control it, she admitted. This is why I fail bonding protocols. My patterns reveal everything. Why would you want to control it? It's beautiful, like wearing your heart on your sleeve, but literally. He passed her a cup of water. Hydrate. Coffee dehydrates humans, probably does the same to Zilani. She drank, watching him return to the endless dance of orders. He was right. She couldn't hide what she felt. Every emotion painted itself across her skin for anyone to read. The coalition called it a failure of control. Marcus called it beautiful. Maybe that was the difference between systems that rejected you and people who chose you. The rush eventually slowed. Sarah returned, surveyed the controlled chaos, and nodded approval. Nobody dead, nothing on fire. Better than yesterday. She looked at Kira. You survived your first lunch rush. Congratulations. Marcus doesn't usually let people help on their first day. She's a natural, Marcus said. Only broke 2 cups. 3, Kira corrected. You didn't see the one I knocked into the recycler. Honesty. I like it. Very uncustomer service of you. He started cleaning the equipment. So, want to do this again tomorrow. Work with you? That too. But I meant this. Whatever this is. Coffee education, cultural exchange, mutual exploitation of my employer's generous nature. He met her eyes. I'm not good at subtle. It's a human failing. I like you, Kira. I want to see where this goes. But I also understand if 43 rejections have made you cautious about starting number 44. She thought about it. About the risk of hope, the weight of past failures, the impossibility of a Zilani, and a human finding common ground. Then she thought about coffee that tasted like hope and laughter that involved the whole body. About someone who saw her uncontrolled patterns and called them beautiful. about the simple revolutionary act of choosing instead of being chosen. "I'll be here tomorrow," she said, "but I want to make the coffee. You can lecture me about technique." His smile could have powered the station. "Deal. But I'm starting you on milk steaming. It's an art form. Everything's an art form with you. Occupational hazard of being human. We can't help making things complicated." He paused, then added quietly, "Thank you for taking another chance." "Thank you," she replied, "for making chance seem possible." Sarah cleared her throat. "If you two are done being adorable, we have actual work to do. Marcus, the Etherian delegation, is coming in an hour and wants that thing you made yesterday. Please remember what it was. Triple steam with temporal foam. Already prepping." He turned back to Kira. "Stay? You can help me figure out how to foam milk for beings who exist partially outside linear time. That's impossible. That's what makes it fun." And somehow, standing in a human coffee shop wearing a borrowed apron, her chromatophores still cycling through emotions she couldn't name, Kira thought he might be right. The impossible things were the ones worth trying. 2 weeks into her new routine at the neutral ground, Kira discovered that humans had a disturbing talent for making the abnormal feel normal. She developed what Marcus called barista hands.